Good morning everybody, welcome to my vlog. So I am absolutely knackered today because the kids woke up really early. Oh dear, there's so much to get on with, and that is all completely by the by because I want to talk about some news. Now I'm not quite sure, basically I'm going to try and get into a habit of doing a couple of sort of news segments a week, I think. And I'm going to, haven't quite worked out what the categories are. One of them is definitely going to be renewable technology in general, because I love renewable technology. I think it's quite important to raise awareness of that sort of thing. And the other one, I was thinking might be a bit of an Elon Musk watch. But basically the point is, I read loads of stuff and I'm going to try and corral that information into a couple of news segments, which I will be delivering. Probably on a Tuesday and Friday is my working theory, but maybe not. Maybe we'll do something slightly differently. Hello! Kids coming back from the playground. Hello everybody!
Hello!
Wow, what's that you got?
Magic
Wow,
Pokemon!
goodness! I see, very nice. Okay, dog food purchased. Let's crack on with the news. So, the International Energy Agency, the global energy watchdog, is predicting that by 2030, half the world's energy will come from renewable sources, which, I mean, that would be awesome. However, it is also still saying that that is not going to be enough to actually limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which, you know, I mean, look, we've made a mess of the environment and we're going to have to find a way to work our way out of it. I think that's probably the long and short of this particular one, but at least progress is being made. Anyway, the IEA's fundamental point is that not just that renewable energy is doing well, because it is, and that's great. It's that at the moment, investment in fossil fuels is still way too high. It needs to be cut in half, they're saying, which, I mean, is that realistic? Probably not. I think the way to cut investment in fossil fuels is for fossil fuels to be uncompetitive. And that is going to happen. That is happening already to some extent. The reason why people build wind farms and put solar panels on their roofs and stuff like that is because it actually makes economic sense most of the time. I mean, I'm pleased to see that they're not advocating like a complete cold turkey, just stop fossil fuels, because there's no point wishing for something that is wholly unrealistic and wouldn't even be in society's best interest. But we definitely do want to try and prioritise things in the right direction, I think, and that is something that governments have a part to play in, you know, with the various climate summits that happen. You know, COP28 I think is coming and things like that. There's good work to be done, because helping fossil fuels to be less competitive is something that, you know, you can achieve through regulation. And I personally have always been a strong believer that it's actually a good thing for a country to move towards renewable energy generation, because it means that it keeps employment in the country. Usually it provides jobs, it keeps the money in the country. It actually makes the country more self-sufficient from an energy point of view and from an economic point of view, which is fundamentally, I think, a net benefit to basically every country, except one that's only reason to exist is to export fossil fuels, of course. Sorry, Saudi Arabia, but you know, the good news is they've got loads of sunlight, so there is loads of good work that they can be doing with the natural resources that they have. Just maybe try and leave a bit more of the oil in the ground. Anyway, that's what my take is on this one. I'm just about to go and get Jasper, who's at a friend's house. Before I do that, let's just quickly talk about the next news article. A study led by the University of Exeter and University College London and funded by a UK government agency has said that photovoltaics may actually make up the majority of energy generation by 2050, and that is without additional support from the government to help sort of accelerate the change. Now that doesn't really surprise me, because I think photovoltaics is just plain magic. You know, it's a bit overcast today, so I haven't bothered putting my tiny little 40-watt solar panel out, but my mum's got some on her house. They are a bit shaded, they're a bit facing in the wrong direction, but they still generate 250 watts. Even on a day like this when there's not a lot of sunlight around at all, and when the sun is bright and it lands directly on them, it's like 4 kilowatts. It's just magic. Maintenance free, energy generating magic. So yeah, it does not surprise me that you know, they think photovoltaics is going to be a significant, in fact the most significant part of energy generation fairly quickly. I mean, this country gets very dark in winter, so we are going to have to find some way to kind of overcome that storage issue, probably, if we want to be totally self-sufficient. But of course, if we just link up with other grids, you know, countries that are sunnier in winter, you know, further south, you know, that actually, and they were talking about that actually, there's, you know, great big cables being laid to do exactly this. So yeah, you know, the future's bright, the future's sun-powered. And it's basically just sort of another bit that sort of adds on to what I was saying a minute ago. You know, the world is moving towards renewable technology, and the reason why it is moving to this new sustainable energy generation is fundamentally because it is cheaper and better. And that is, of course, you know, Elon Musk had it right with Tesla. That is the way to get people to shift their habits. Actually make the alternative better. If the alternative is not better, you can't expect people to want to do it. You know, certainly not for some possible, oh, we've got to save our grandkids in 100 years' time. Unfortunately, that's not the way the human brain works, generally speaking. We want to save ourselves, you know, immediately. Perhaps we should have a longer term view on things, but we don't. So it is good that you know, this renewable energy generation is becoming ever increasingly competitive with traditional sources of energy, which are, you know, tend to be quite a lot more polluting and not so good for the environment. Nothing's a panacea, of course. There's always downsides. Even with photovoltaics, there is a lot of industrialization that goes into the manufacture of these solar cells, and quite often the energy for that doesn't actually come from somewhere that's, you know, carbon free. But that will change, of course, with time, because it's one of those virtuous cycles that as you generate more and more clean energy, you can use that clean energy to create the tools necessary to generate more and more clean energy. Whereas if you do the opposite, if you just stick with coal then, or oil or gas, then it's, you know, you still have to build the oil and gas plants, you still have to do the exploration, you sink the wells. These things are not carbon free by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, it's good, and I am generally speaking very happy with the direction that things are going, and it's nice to see some of that come through in the news every now and again. Next on the news agenda, apparently their government is going to carry on pushing hydrogen boilers despite the fact that loads of scientific bodies have said it's not a good idea. I mean, yeah. So this is the idea that we can heat our homes by just replacing the methane, which is actually a perfectly sensible fuel that currently flows as in the form of natural gas through our pipes in the country to heat boilers and, you know, cook on stoves and stuff, and we can replace that with hydrogen or some mix of hydrogen, probably with some extra smelly agent in there so that people know that it's on, you know, a bit like they do with methane. But you know, it's ridiculous. It is not a good idea. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Hydrogen is very difficult to deal with, and there's nothing wrong with methane whatsoever. Yes, burning it does produce carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, but you can use carbon in the atmosphere to generate the methane, which would be a much more sensible thing to invest your money in. Industrial methane production from the atmosphere is actually a really good idea, and you can power it using renewable energy. It's actually a really good way to store renewable energy as well. The problem is we don't have the industrialization of the Sabatier process at this point in time, and it's not as efficient as it would need to be. But these are all challenges which are going to be fixed in the future when we basically get to Mars, where these things will be essential for the production of rocket fuel, and that's basically needed because no human rated rocket or vessel has got any chance of leaving Earth, going all the way to Mars and then coming all the way back to Earth without refueling. It'd be impossible. You'd have to launch the Empire State Building from Earth, and what would come back would be a capsule the size of a telephone booth. It's just, from a fuel point of view, not practical. If you can refuel the thing, then you can make the actual vessel that does the travelling a much more reasonable size for some people to be in. So yeah, refueling on Mars is going to solve the Sabatier process, industrialization and efficiency problems through sheer scientific and technological need. But we're not there yet, unfortunately. But this is one of the things I like about space. It does help to drive a lot of things forwards. So I quite like the, I've been watching For All Mankind on Apple TV recently, and it's a great series. I came out a while ago, and I should have watched it then, but I never got around to it. And now I am finally watching it. And I like the way that they show a world where the fact that the space race continued beyond the end of the 60s and 70s, that would lead to greater technological advancement at a greater pace, because it would, by sheer necessity, and by the fact that so many billions, tens, hundreds of billions would be put into R&D across the world. It would obviously just drive it all forwards, because that's what happens when we research things, when we focus on them, we come up with solutions and we make it happen. So yeah, space will solve it, but for now, hydrogen is just not a sensible idea. I do not see how it can be in this particular case. It'll leak, it'll burn, it'll embrittle and destroy the network slowly but surely. I mean, maybe they're just going to put a completely new network in, but can you imagine the infrastructure costs of that? And even then, what are they going to use for piping this stuff? Anyway, so it was the National Infrastructure Commission that basically said, yeah, hydrogen, not suitable for heating homes. So, I mean, at the moment, we've got heat pumps and they work fairly well, but I think long term, if you want to pipe a flammable gas into people's houses, then the simplest hydrocarbon possible is the way to go. And in order to make that carbon neutral and not damage the environment, the best way to do that is to actually, sequester that CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's where you get the carbon from. You add in a bit of water and a load of energy, out comes usable methane. Boom. And that brings us nicely onto the final topic I want to talk about today, which is the UK is going to space. Well, specifically 4 UK astronauts on the first all-British mission are possibly going to space on board a SpaceX Crew Dragon. Obviously, it's like the only way anybody gets to space these days, unless you're Russian or Chinese, I suppose. But they don't do it very often. And yeah, it's very exciting. So it's through Axiom Space, who do the sort of private space missions. They've gone to the ISS. It's not known whether this one will go to the ISS or will just be a sort of a free-flying one, just orbit the planet for a little while. They're going to wheel Tim Peake out of retirement, potentially. If the mission does go to the ISS, then NASA insists on having a NASA-certified astronaut on board the craft, which I suppose makes sense. And Tim Peake has been to space before and has done that, I guess he is NASA certified. He'll do the job anyway. He'll be the mission commander. That is the plan. And I'm actually really excited about this. I think it's a terrible shame that the UK has not been more involved in manned space flight. And I mean, we have quite a vibrant space industry. There's I went to the University of Surrey, and they have a Surrey Satellite Technologies company that was based on the campus. Don't know if it still is, probably is. And they make small sats, and there's a big industry for that sort of thing actually in the UK. So it brings in a lot of money, it brings in a lot of investment, it brings in a lot of innovation. We should be at the centre of that, I think. We've always been a very innovative country, so I'm very excited about this. Now, it'll probably be a little while before this mission actually leaves the ground, although of course the nice thing about SpaceX is because they get their first stages back, they are able to launch with a much higher cadence than traditional rocket companies, and they reuse the actual Crew Dragon cargo, the Crew Dragon space capsules as well. So that also helps. Reusability is always going to help with availability and timing. One thing to quickly add though, for you people who are like, oh, we mustn't spend public funds on space, despite the fact that it often actually is extremely beneficial. I mean, to be honest, I reckon it'd be worth it just as a publicity, for STEM subjects at school. I think it would be worth it from that point alone, actually, but or maybe not, but it would certainly you know, that is a benefit. Anyway, it's not going to be publicly funded. They're going to seek private funding for this mission and presumably do a bunch of experiments which companies are going to pay them to do. So yeah, I'm very excited about all of that. And that is the last news article for today. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. If you have, remember to leave a like and share it and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on X and Instagram, links are in the description. And I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. And I'll see you all in the next episode of my vlog. Bye.